Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where we explore ways to get healthy, wealthy, and wise. With a combination of guest interviews and solo episodes, I hope you will be inspired and motivated to become the best of whatever you are. I'm Elle Russ, #1 best-selling author and subject expert with over a decade of helping thousands of people across the globe. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about free guides, masterclasses, online courses, and more. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, today, special interesting guest, Amy Margolis. She's a licensed therapist and she's the co-clinical director of Santa Monica Counseling, and she wrote a book called Here's the Memo, which is a collection of sort of every memo she wished she had gotten when she needed it the most. It's her love letter to all women, and so we're going to talk a little bit about her journey to that and her work with people. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you, Elle. Thank you so much for having me.
So right away, if anyone listening was like, ooh, her voice. Yes, it's because outside of the clinical world, and you'll hear as we go along, Amy is a classically and also comedically trained actor at some of the most reputable places. And she has done a lot of voiceover work. You've heard her on Nickelodeon, Netflix, Disney, commercials, podcasts, video games, and all that kind of stuff. So as we go along, and I'm sure, let's just start there for a second. Your voice is very unique. It is one of those, oh my God, you should do voiceover voices. Were you told that as a kid growing up?
No, I was not told that. And in fact, I didn't even know I had a weird voice until middle school. And then the boy I was crushing on started teasing me mercilessly. So I felt like a big loser, truthfully. And then I moved to New York as a young person, and I was working in adoptions, and I took an acting class. And that's when I found out what a voiceover was. And that's when I went, all in for voiceover.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was like, okay, I got enough shit for this voice, and now I'm going to try to cash in. So it was good. It was good.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of like when I was a kid and someone once like tried to make fun of me for having like big lips. And then like I became like, who's laughing now? Everyone's injecting the shit.
Who is laughing now? Oh my gosh.
I guess who's not paying for that? Me, jerks.
Yes.
Yeah, no. All right. But let's get into this because you went through some struggles. Eating disorder, some bad stories here. So let's get into some of the dark times, and then we'll get to sort of you coming out of that and then helping other people do the same.
Yeah. So, without getting too much into family of origin, I definitely thought I was too big at a young age. I had a tall, skinny sister, and I decided by age 3 I was fat. And started counting her French fries, her green beans, wanted to look like her. My parents lost a baby after me. She was born and lived a few days. And I think I wanted to cheer everybody up and be small at the same time. And, there was stuff that went on, and I think people choose eating disorders kind of as a solution for trauma. They're self-regulating. So I think for me, it was like I loved food, but I always wanted to control it. And it was my best friend. And then it kind of went awry in high school after after losing my virginity with a guy who didn't care about me. I went on the diet that kind of never ended and found myself anorexic. Yeah.
At what was the point of, was it forced into help? Was it a self-recognition of, oh my God, I need help, right? Because like any of these things, you have to want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anybody that's been through addiction will tell you, you feel possessed. You know what you want to do. Like alcoholics know how they want to drink, and you just have a complete inability to do it. So for me, I knew I couldn't stop dieting, and I was scared, but then I would just brush it away because there was no option. And then I guess it was, I met a guy in high school. It was my senior year of high school. And this is so embarrassing, but I wanted my boobs back. I wanted to look like a woman. I met this
vanity
hot guy.
Gotcha. Vanity.
Yeah, it was vanity. I was like, I gotta get some boobs here, and I can't pay for them. So I really wanted to gain the weight. But it's like anorexia is an addiction to control, right? So I was like, okay, I'll try to eat normal a few days a week and then I'll control it or restrict a few days a week. So then I went ape shit. I ate everything that wasn't nailed down. So the weight started to creep up, but I was still completely in disordered eating until I hit bottom in college. I hit bottom in college. I had to move off campus, one too many parties, and I realized like I don't have roommates to lie to anymore. I'm alone. I'm either
Mhm.
going to sink or swim, and that's when I called the counseling center and shout out to my college therapist because it changed everything for me.
Ah, those people
Yeah.
are amazing. Those people are amazing.
Yeah.
Just a few, if you could rattle off a list off the top there of some, you mentioned the behavior of how you were like, oh, I'm going to count how many fries my sister eats, right? Like you're trying to model mock someone else, right? Like,
Yeah.
can you share some of those kind of games that you would play so
Oh
that if
my
someone's
God.
listening and perhaps doesn't think that they might, you know what I mean? There might be
It's
people that are like,
so
I'm not anorexic, and then they might listen to some shit and go, oh, fuck.
Oh my God, it is like it's so embarrassing, but it's so good I can laugh about it now. So when I was anorexic, I ate the exact same thing every single day. And I like for one thing I would do was I would get apples because an apple was a meal, but they had to be the biggest fucking apples around because that was
Or
all I was getting. And then I was only allowed to take a bite every 5 minutes. So like that apple would last me a couple hours. Like I'd walk across campus with that apple. It was crazy. So but at the time it was like, it just was. That was like what I did. That was my identity. Another behavior for me was absolutely to lie about food. My roommates would be like, do you want to go to the dining hall? And I'd be like, well, let's go to the commuter cafe because I need to study. Then I'd get a huge sandwich. And then I'd be like, yeah, I can't eat with you. I'm going to go, to the library, whatever. And then I would throw that
Gross.
sandwich down the laundry chute. Like crazy shit like that.
I
Like
wonder if the people in the laundry area all these years are like, what? Who the
yes,
fuck
exactly. And even with my
asshole's throwing this
parents,
food down here?
no, with my parents, they'd be like, "Do you want dinner?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm going to take it upstairs because I'm getting ready for a date." And I would literally leave a few crumbs, like Santa when you leave the cookies out and you try to trick your kids. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what I did over and over. And I would put the food in these plastic bags and throw them out in the backfield. Like I've never actually said this out loud to anybody, so it's funny that I'm doing it on your show. But that's the kind of stuff I did, and it was just what I had to do. There was no choice. I didn't think it was weird. It was survival. That's what an eating disorder is.
And it sounds very sounds like it can become quite, like you said, like rigid and routine, right? Like if I'm gonna have this
Yes.
apple, then I only have a bite every, like some kind of, as if the structure, does that feel like the structure makes it okay? What I would love to know a little bit more of the inner workings of the mind and also of people you've worked with. What are some other different experiences too of some of these types of behaviors that people might not at first glance think of,
Yeah.
as anorexic? I think some people just think it's like constant restricting, but it's interesting in the ways in which it manifests.
Yeah. So I personally think all eating disorders, whether you're 500 pounds or 90 pounds, I really do believe they start with a core sentence, which is, I don't get to have needs. It's bad to be hungry. All, I think anorexia is like shutting down your basic need for sustenance because there was no room for your feelings and needs. So you shut them down and you don't have needs. And I do think that that's true for everybody with an eating disorder. And I think people that become obese say fuck it and they eat, and anorexics say fuck it and they starve, right? And then
Yep.
I think a lot of bulimics solve their bulimia with anorexic behaviors, like very rigid, because they feel like they can't be trusted with food because they've binged, right? Um, but many bulimics aren't even overweight, but they think they can't be trusted. And it's all a cover for deeper trauma. So for me, eating that way, recovery is about not even really talking about the food. Recovery is really about talking about your internal experience and what you've been through. And what led to this cover where you felt like you had to control everything and shut down all your needs?
Yeah, it's the on both ends of the spectrum. Because I spoke to someone who was obese, lost it, had that story and book about that, and we're talking like he was pushing 4 bills,
Yeah.
and it's interesting the hiding and the manipulation, like the what people go through. You become a liar. It's rough.
Yep.
So then there's like that other aspect too. Right now, no one really knows who you are. You're further removed from everybody, right? Because you're not
Yes.
being vulnerable and open. My gosh, what a secret
Yes.
shit. So then, you get help. Thank God. Let's cut to when you start or wherever you want to go. But I would guess the
Yeah.
next jump would be to somewhere around like deciding you want to help others.
Yeah. So I got into therapy at age 19. I'm so grateful. I was young. And I remember like a year in, I was like, could I actually do this for a living? Because this is amazing. And I was studying to be a second grade teacher. And I would go to student teaching and I didn't care if they were cheating or they were dyslexic or they failed their spelling test. I did not care. I cared that somebody's parents were getting a divorce or so and so's parents was a drug addict. And I I went straight back to grad school. Like I literally quit student teaching. I was the first person at my college to do that. And my mom was a teacher, so she thought I had lost my marbles. And I went straight back to grad school to become a therapist. And it doesn't feel like work. It feels like my calling, like it's my thing. Do you know what I mean?
Obvious,
I
clearly,
know,
because you are just, it's so obvious, I think, from listening to that story that drawn, compelled, just
yes,
natural proclivity towards this.
yes. I love stories. I love people. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely my thing. And I think for me, I wouldn't, the book that I wrote, there is self-disclosure. I wouldn't have done it 10 years ago because I think as a therapist, I like to be a blank slate for people. But
Sure, sure.
I'm in my 50s. It's time to leave something here. And I just see so many women in my practice with no real active eating disorder with like a anorexic mindset. Like if their body's not perfect, they can't have a good weekend or like they're powerful, successful women, but they buttered their bread at dinner and they just shouldn't have done that because they have this 5 pounds and it's making me nuts. So I feel like we all have this patriarchal message about perfection. And that's why I'm writing and that's why I'm speaking, because if I can be one small voice to say that's a load of shit and we get to be happy no matter what we look like or what we weigh, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to really own our power as women. And I know men struggle with eating disorders too. And I'm not denying that, but women are objectified in our culture. And a lot of women I see, and a lot of friends I have, and my daughter's friends, I see this reduction of who they are to like a number on the scale or a perceived flaw in the mirror.
Hmm. I think one of the revelatory things for me was like being in Hollywood, and there's a famous model who was at someone's house. It was like, first time I've seen her in person. And what I did not know, and again, just because of like Photoshop for the for the
Yes.
covers of Vogue, she has like a pretty prominent scar on her face and has no shame
Interesting.
about it. Like she's just there, you know what I mean? It's there, but it's definitely noticeable where you go, oh, and then you have the thought, huh, okay, and then
Yeah.
you kind of go right on, like
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're like, all right, I'm glad that that was accepted somewhere. And granted, but it was always covered up. Um,
Yes.
but I remember being like, okay, that's someone's, like someone who's this lofty person you see in magazines is human and has something on their face that, most people wouldn't want, right? It would be so
Yes.
it just kind of go,
Yes.
oh, everybody's, got a thing. And, you just in Hollywood, that stuff's broken apart. And the objectification of women where we live and that kind of industry is really prevalent. And same with the eating disorder stuff because of the industry. So it's kind of a hotbed of shit over here for this kind of topic. You're in the perfect area of the
Yeah.
country for it.
Yeah.
But let's get into some of the memos, some personal stories, theories, exercises. Uh, but let's talk about some thought patterns, some things, some 180s that you've witnessed within yourself, uh, that don't have to do with eating disorders. I mean, not that it's all not
Yeah.
connected, but
I
yeah.
mean, so this book is kind of, and the world doesn't need another book, but I came up in a time where there wasn't social media, there wasn't YouTube where you could just get information at your fingertips. So I getting into recovery for anorexia, there was a lot of shame underneath that eating behavior. So once I started eating and getting healthier, a lot of feelings came up, attachment issues, low self-esteem, all the things. So the book kind of, it shares about the different chapters of your life. So I talk about, dating, heartbreak, long-term relationships. What legacy do you want to leave here? So I think, but the through line for the book really is for women to kind of just let go of this perfectionism, let go of what everybody else is doing, stay in your own lane and be the star in your life. How do you want to live your day kind of thing? And I think it's so important to be intentional, especially now when distraction is at our fingertips and women are caretakers. So by the end of the day, you might spend all your time on something or get exhausted and you haven't even, tended to what you care about the most or your own goals and dreams. So I think the book is really about staying centered and, I don't know, like learning about who you are and how you want to show up and what you want your life to be.
I think like yes, and the internet business and the stuff that's got social media, all the things that we all
Yep.
participate, we have to do, it's kind of part of it now. But because of that, it is drawing people away from authenticity in the sense that people then are second guessing, like, oh, do I need to do that thing then?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that trend, that thing, or like, right, if there's that constant like am I
Yes.
doing it right? There's a more comparison than there would be back in the day. And I always go back to like my ancestral, training on that kind of stuff. But we had tighter tribes. We had so much more intercommunication that people wouldn't feel isolated and alone as much, right? And someone would
Right.
see an expression on your face and know hey, what's going on? And now we're behind our computers, right? At a home
Yes.
office. And so it is so interesting. And I know authenticity is such a catchphrase, but it reigns fucking supreme my
Yes.
whole
Yes.
life, like even in Hollywood for all those years, even like interning in casting offices. I remember a small example. I remember I was somewhere and someone said something like they loved a certain movie, but I hated that movie. But we were in a casting office and people were used to like kissing the casting director's ass. And I was just like, I didn't really like that movie. Like I was just honest, like people were kind of like, what? Like bad move, like agree with the and I was like, yeah, no, people actually at the end of the day, people appreciated it
People appreciate it.
more than and I found that that was like such a strength, even though for a while I felt not ashamed, but like my downtown Chicago no shit tell it like it is at first in
Yes.
California was a little bit abrupt for a lot of people, even though it's just totally normal for me. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so it was just kind of interesting. I found that, and so I was like, no, 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 I just that's the way to go, man. Like because I knew that it was appreciated, so that when I went into the internet business stuff and it came out, I thought, no, like I'm not gonna succumb to the stuff, right? There's all things we know we
No.
need to do. And if you're an actor,
Right.
you need to get out there, get an agent, put yourself in front of casting. You gotta take some action. But it doesn't
Yes.
mean I've got to go follow. I don't know. When you follow the herd, you step in shit. There you go.
Yes. I love it. I love it. And honestly, it is so when people aren't authentic and they're people pleasing or just being agreeable, to me, I find it really boring and disingenuine. And I feel like people that are authentic are more interesting, confident. When you're dating somebody and it's like, well, where do you want to go? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go? I'll do whatever you want. It's so boring. I
Oh,
want Mexican. Let's fucking go. I think it's like people, I
we
think people,
appreciate decisiveness as a sign of confidence, and that is always admired because we trust and have faith in that person that they
yes.
have
And,
faith in
and I
themselves.
want, and I want, I want friends like that. I want friends that are going to call me out. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I think you're being unfair with your husband here. I think you should, I like that. That's a contribution to me. I don't, you know what I mean? I think it's really refreshing that, you said the truth. And back in the day when you went to castings and oh God, everybody was kissing everybody's ass.
You
And it's
said
just so
kissing.
funny.
I
It's
felt
so
like I
funny.
walked in. I felt like I walked into a world where I'm like, no one would flip off someone in the parking lot because that person could hire them next week or be an exec. Like, there's no other city you live in where people are like, you know what I mean? I don't
Yes,
know.
I do. I
It,
do
it, it
know what
was
you
just a
mean.
very interesting thing. And I was just like, yeah. And listen, I did well and it was so much fun and it was great. And people really appreciated it. And even though they were stunned by it, they in
Yes.
some way admired it. And I think because everybody has a part of them that wants to be more authentic. So let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about that with some of the clients, people you worked with, that in terms of gaining some of that, some of those tips to being more authentic. It doesn't mean wear your heart on your sleeve. Don't do a Facebook Live on your trauma, right? Where no one's
Yeah.
right. So, can you
Yeah.
give us some pointers there for the people listening? They're like, you know what, man, I probably need to get a little bit more real.
I think it's baby steps, and I think don't wait until you're not afraid. If like if you have a friendship and it feels really one-sided, maybe challenge yourself to take up a little space and say, "Hey, I love listening to all this, but I want to check in with you about something." Like, give it a shot to go deeper or be more vulnerable or take up more space. And if that person can't handle that or brings the conversation back to themselves, you might want to rethink that friendship. Or if there's somebody really cool in your life and you want to get to know them better, you might feel weird, but you could invite them out for coffee or, just baby steps in kind of being more authentic. And if there are goals and dreams you have, like, don't wait till you're not afraid. Just, you know, act your way into right thinking. And if you want to sign up for that acting class or you want to, sign up and then walk through the fear because everybody's afraid. And then once you do it, it becomes more, you'll see if you like it. It gets to be messy. You get to be teachable. I think it's just an easy time to be a spectator in your life. And I just think we're here to be on the court. And do you know what I mean? We're all
Mhm.
here for our own little mission. And it's just so easy to get disillusioned when you get on social media or, like my daughter is in this really great girl band and they're doing an
Awesome.
album and they have quite a following. And then she said, you know what? Right now, I can't listen to other people's music just right now
I get
because
that.
it messes with her, and it's kind of like me with this book. Like I'm a nobody. I'm anonymous. I'm not a social media person. I don't like it, but I need to promote this book because I want to do right by the book. And I think the book will help a lot of people. So, I could sit here and be like, oh my God, I have to do, but it's kind of like this is fun. This is fun. I'm
Right.
doing it.
This part of it's fun. There's parts of it that are more fun than others to some people.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. But I could get tripped up. I could be like, oh my God, at your age, and like, look at all these other therapists with bazillion followers, and you're like anonymous. But it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That's all like getting caught up in ego. I just get grounded in what I'm here to do in my life.
one of the things that I mention in my second book is that one of the best ways to get out of yourself, confidence, issues with like being shy or, speaking in public or any of this kind of stuff, or even maybe it's like, okay, and I know I need to do a social media thing and I got to become more comfortable with this. I, I, I don't really necessarily recommend a speech class, but I always recommend an improv class
Yeah.
because, and I think you'd attest to this. Improv is
Yes.
one of the cheapest ways to be in the most comfortable if well taught, which, depending on where you are, but usually it's
100%.
usually it's done by really great teachers. Where the first literally like I mean, Amy, would you not agree when you're at the Groundlings or me at Second City? It's
Yes.
like one of the first things you
Yes.
learn is, hey, we're all gonna fucking fail here. So just throw up your hands
Totally.
and say, I
Totally.
failed. I think it's like the first teaching of an improv teacher. I'm getting chills right now thinking about it because it is so great because it's not about trying to be funny and it's not about you're there
No.
trying to be funny. It's about trying to play by the rules of the game and being outside of yourself and being in the
Yes.
moment. And it's the cheapest way to get into your physical body and do that and make an ass of yourself. And it's totally awkward and weird and disgusting and awful the first couple of times you're in an improv class. But it's really helpful for people in this day and age if you do need to get that kind of confidence at the very minimum to sort of be like, all right, I feel because nothing's more fucking frightening than that. It's like what you
That's
talked
right.
about earlier.
That's
There's
right.
nothing more scary about fucking improv, in my opinion. And I did it for years. I'm not scared of it now, but
Yeah.
and that is so a part of being able to do what we do and promote your stuff.
Yes, I so agree with this. I just remember in my 20s, I definitely, the word improv, I was like, no, no way.
Hmm.
Then when I got to be 40, I had my third kid, and one of my best friends was a Groundling, which is an improv school out here in LA. And I was like, I want to do that. And I'm sorry, I was postpartum. I'm like, what are you thinking? And I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna take a class. So I didn't audition to get into the school, but I took an intro class. It put me in the best mood. I was creative in the rest of my life. I felt more alive. I was more in the moment, and then I decided to audition for the program, but it is so freeing and it's so good for perfectionists and it's so good for people that are shy. And you're in a class, so nobody cares. It's just about having fun.
Yeah, thanks you so much for mentioning it's great for perfectionists
It's
because
so good.
you
It's so
kind of
good.
can't get it perfectly right. And you also, it's such good teamwork and
Yes.
listening work, right? You can't
Yes.
negate.
Yes.
The rules of improv, such a life game. And also, literally, like one of the least expensive ways to like do
Yep.
something for that period of time. And so you don't need to go in there. One of the hard things about going to class like that is this who do I think I am? Everyone in here is thinking I'm trying to be something that I'm not. Or,
Yes.
it's not. Just go in there and be like, I just want to like get out of myself. And I tell you what,
Yes.
like you said, energize, creative in different parts of your life, alive. I
Yes.
highly recommend it.
I also think we're in a culture where it's like, well, what's the result going to be? Why am I going to take this class if I'm not going to get anywhere? And it really isn't about getting anywhere. It's about showing up and being in the moment and just seeing how that translates in your life. Do you
Ooh,
know what
good
I
one.
mean?
Yeah,
Like I
because it isn't about because you don't know where it's going, really. And if you
yes.
try to plan, I remember you're gonna laugh, but I had to do an audition for an improvised based television show. So they call all the improvisers in for this. You probably went out for it, right? So
This is so
back in the
funny.
day, and there was someone, a guy who'd been on TV, had been in a show, and he clearly wasn't an improviser, but because he'd been on a sitcom, they had him in there and they paired us up and they paired me up with him. And before we went on, he was trying to plan with me backstage, and I looked at him and I go, dude, that's not how this works, man. I was just like, sorry. And they were like, okay, ready. And I was like, sorry, man, that is not when you plan, you always fail in improv. It always
Yeah.
fails. It always comes off as just inauthentic and trying
Yes.
too hard and blowing it for the other people and barreling over. So it's so translatable, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And I think it's such a good, the rules of improv is like yes and, right? So if somebody says, yeah, I just delivered the milk, I'm a milkman, their partner can't say, you're not a milkman. What are you talking about? Because the scene dies, right? So they
Right.
have to be like, yes, and you're the hottest milkman I've ever met. Then it can go somewhere. But I think that's a good metaphor for life. Like, yes, this is happening, and instead of like, yes, this is happening and I don't want it to be happening. And, like resistance. And you can't go anywhere when you're resisting what is. So I think like using the improv of like, this is what's happening and what can I do is it's a powerful place to go.
If anyone is curious about this topic, I think I could maybe still stand by this. It's been a while, but one of the best books on this is called Impro by Keith Johnstone, who was part of a San Francisco-based improvised group, and it's a really excellent book if you're interested in that. But also just take a class. But reading it might get you a little bit juiced up for it.
Yep.
Um, let's talk about give us some memos. What are some memos you'd like us to know about that we wish we had? Let's close out the last part of this with
Let's close out the last. So I think the memo, well, the exercise I'd kind of like to leave your listeners with, if you've during this podcast heard anything that resonates about maybe a negative voice you have about your appearance or a voice that holds you back, like, um, you know what I mean? Like for instance, I have an amazing client who she went away with her husband, but she couldn't really enjoy the weekend because she still had baby weight. And So she just robbed herself of this intimate, beautiful time with her husband. And if you have a voice in your head that kind of holds you back from your power or enjoying your life fully because of some perceived flaw you have. So I would invite you, like, that is not your identity. And if you can look at that thinking, you can externalize it and maybe give it a name, and have a dialogue with it. Because all those voices that are negative do have a secondary gain. They're trying to protect us somehow. But to have a dialogue with it, maybe in your journal, like, why are you here? Why are you trying to ruin my weekend? What the fuck, and let that voice
I like
say,
that.
well, if I stop riding you, you won't lose that 10 pounds. And that's not true, like that's not true. It's like when we get in alignment and we become our own inner loving parent, that's when we're happy and successful and we reach our goals. So really just externalizing the negative voices you might have in your head, dialoguing with them, and your higher self, the self that can observe it all, let you be in charge and take the wheel. I hope that made sense and didn't
Yeah.
sound like a bunch of therapeutic mumbo jumbo.
No, 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 it's wonderful. And let's talk. You work with people in different ways. You do individuals, couples, and you also run groups. So tell
Yes.
us about the ways you work with people in person, and then do you work with people remotely? If someone wanted to work with you,
Actually, I'm only teletherapy right now. I've been teletherapy since the pandemic.
okay,
And
great. I'm so glad that that has happened for so many different groups for everybody to make it so much more
yeah, yeah,
convenient.
and
Yeah.
it's good. It's good because I have a women's group, and it's funny because a few people moved out of state, so it worked. It worked out great because they're all still together. But yeah, I'm an EMDR trauma therapist, so I do that. I treat couples. I do a lot of family systems therapy, emotionally focused couples therapy, and I work with individuals. And I do eating disorders, but a lot of anxiety, depression. I work with a lot of women. And we work on this kind of stuff. Like, this is your life. Like, how can you, like, wherein lies your power and how can you live it the most authentically and happily?
Love it. And for all of that information and to connect with her, you can go to Amy Margolis, Margolis, LCSW.com. Thank you so much. And we can get your book at all the major bookstores, right? And tell us the full title.
The title is Here's the Memo, and it's a life guide for women.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and with the world with the book. Everyone, go get a copy of the book and check her work out and join one of the groups. Or if you are resonating with how she's talking about some of the things you might be struggling with, then reach out, right? It changed her life. That's why she's doing it, right?
Yes.
So thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much, Elle, for having me. Thank you.
All right. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, I would so appreciate you leaving a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about partner discounts on amazing products, visit lruss.com/discounts.